Hello, welcome to my channel, Read by Angelique. I'm Angelique, surprise, surprise, and we are currently reading Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. We just finished chapter 10, so if you are new here, stop, because anything from here on is spoilers, unless you already know the story of Phantom of the Opera, have read the book. Because the book is it just has a lot more than the movie or the musical. So, go back to the beginning and start again. Otherwise, you might be disappointed by knowing too many secrets. Quick recap about chapter 9 and 10, because I read both those chapters in the last video. What is the recap? My goodness. So Christine sends Raoul a letter being like, let's meet at this masquerade ball in this room by this place, blah, blah, blah. So Raoul gets ready. He has to like get super nice, put a mask on. He goes to this, to the opera house for a masquerade ball, and there's just like a lot of people there, models and theater goers and actors and actresses, and they're having a good time. They're living large, but everyone's dressed in a mask, so we can't tell who's who, and he feels like he's kind of hidden and he likes it. So he goes around, meanders for a while, and then on his way to go to the place to meet Christine he sees this guy who's like, that's the ghost that I saw in the cemetery. He's dressed in this red velvet, and he has like this sign on him that says, "Don't touch me." And there's this moment where one of the people standing around him, because he's like a big deal, like he's standing out. His head, his mask looks like a skull. He's called like Death One or something like that, which I thought was really interesting. And what is he called? Anyway, one of the people does not heed his warning that's written on him, and this skull, this hand that's just made of bones, comes out of his jacket and grabs the person's arm that tries to touch him in like a vice-like grip, and he like screams and runs away in terror, and all the other people around him are scared, but they're kind of like drunk and thrilled, you know, like this is kind of cool, kind of creepy. They don't think it's real, you know, it's just part of the act. And then this black mask comes and tugs on his arm, and he immediately knows. He's like, this is Christine. Follows her. She keeps on looking behind her as they're going, and he's like, what's going on? They go to the meeting place, and she shuts the door, but she like looks out, and she's like, he's following us, and they're really concerned and different things. Raoul and Christine get into another argument in the room, because the opera ghost does follow them, the man in velvet, and Raoul wants a fight. He's about to like burst out of their room to go up the stairs where the ghost went, and she shuts the door and like barricades it and even fights him a little bit, and he's surprised how strong she is for how small she actually is. And then she's like, you can't do that. They get into an argument. He says a lot of mean things, and she's like, I'll forgive you one day, like when you want it or something weird. She's like, this is gonna be the last time I see you. And really dramatic stuff, honestly. And then he when he gets to the opera house, he like forgets how mad he is at her, because he thinks that she's like sleeping with this guy and just not a woman of character anymore. And then a part of him thinks that she's kind of been brainwashed, And when he gets to the opera house, he kind of forgets all that and just is feeling love for her. But when they start talking, all of his anger comes back, and it just says some really hurtful things. Anyway, she says that she'll forgive him one day, says that he cannot follow her. Basically, goodbye forever is what she says. Leaves the room, and whatever action or hand motion she gives him convinces him that he cannot follow, should not follow. And he doesn't follow her for a little while. And then he decides to go visit her dressing room in the opera house. And he goes in there, kind of looks around, but then she comes. And so he hides in this like back corridor in the dressing room and is watching her. And she leans on the table and she just keeps saying, like, poor Eric, poor Eric. And then this voice, this beautiful, handsome, seductive voice starts singing. And it's like it's coming through the walls and getting closer and closer and going straight for Christine. And Raoul is like, oh my goodness, that's beautiful. And Christine had taken off her mask and she was like pale and deathly looking. But as soon as she hears the voice, she like perks up and gets super excited, almost like the book describes it like a doctor is coming with her cure. So full of hope and things. And then Christine starts just like walking towards this mirror, and Raoul steps out from where he's been hiding, but he stands right behind her so she can't see him in the reflection somehow. I'm like, he's a big guy and she's small. Like, how is he doing this? Whatever. And then she like reaches out towards it and he's about to like grab her. Raoul's about to grab her and put her in an embrace. But then the room starts spinning and he sees Christine everywhere around him. And he's like, it's like super trippy, but they're all like laughing at him, all these Christines that are around him. And then I think, and then she's gone. She just like disappears and he's there and he's like, who in the world is Eric? And I'm gonna kill someone. And where did Christine go? And what in the world just happened? And then in the next chapter, in chapter 10, Raoul decides to go and visit Christine's adoptive mother. And when he gets there, Christine is there. And she looks completely healthy. And he's like, okay, cool. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad I'm seeing you. I didn't think I was going to see you for a long time. Where have you been? What happened? Who's Eric? Well, he actually doesn't say the name for a while. They argue again because Christine admits to both her adoptive mother and Raoul that the angel of music doesn't exist. And the mom, like the adopted mother, was like, what? You told me he was. Like, I believed it. Who's been giving you these lessons the past 3 months? And she's like, you're not going to see me. And both the mother and Raoul ask her to promise that she's not going to disappear again, and she won't promise. And they argue and argue and argue. Raoul confesses his love. Diane says she can never marry, but she has a wedding ring on her finger. And he's like, what's that? Like, you're not going to get married, but you have that. You're not married, but you've obviously given someone your promise that you're going to marry them. And she's like, she gets like all independent woman, like, I make the decisions for my own life. I get to do what I want. You can believe what I say or not, blah, blah, blah. And then he tells her that he kind of thinks that she's crazy, but it goes back and forth from him like hating her to him being like, I will always love you. And then at some point he's like, I know there's no angel of music and I know his name. His name's Eric. And that like shakes her. She's like, never say that name. Like something bad is going to happen. And he's like, why did you say poor Eric while you were in that room? He confesses that he was like eavesdropping on her. And she is like, stop listening at doors. And he was like, I wasn't at the door. I was actually in the room. Which I thought was funny. And basically she's like, Oh no, he says, why do you say poor Eric when I was there? You should be saying poor Raoul. You should give me sympathy. And she's like, if you knew the story, you would understand that it's the most tragic thing ever. And then somehow they calm down the argument. And he's like, just, can you promise me that I will see you again? Like, you don't have to love me. You don't even have to marry me in the future, even though, like, that is the only place his head has been. And she's like, okay, I promise that I'll see you again. And he's like, when? And she says, tomorrow. So anyway, so maybe we're headed into tomorrow. That was a very long recap. I just loved the last 2 chapters so much. Anywho, Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux, Chapter 11, Above the Trap Doors. The next day, he saw her at the opera. She was still wearing the plain gold ring. She was gentle and kind to him. She talked to him of the plans which he was forming, of his future, of his career. He told her that the date of the polar expedition had been put forward and that he would leave France in 3 weeks, or a month at least. She suggested, almost gaily, that he must look upon the voyage with delight, as a stage towards his coming fame. And when he replied that fame without love was no attraction in his eyes, she treated him as a child whose sorrows were but short-lived. How can you speak so lightly of such serious things? He asked. Perhaps we shall never see each other again. I may die during that expedition. Or I, she said simply. She no longer smiled or jested. She seemed to be thinking of some new thing that had entered her mind for the first time. Her eyes were all aglow with it. What are you thinking of, Christine? I am thinking that we shall not see each other again. And does that make you so radiant? And that, in a month, we shall have to say goodbye, forever. Unless, Christine, we pledge our faith and wait for each other forever. She put her hand on his mouth. Hush, Raoul. You know there is no question of that. And we shall never be married. That is understood. She seemed suddenly almost unable to contain an overpowering gaiety. She clapped her hands with childish glee. Raoul stared at her in amazement. But, she continued, holding out her 2 hands to Raoul, or rather giving them to him, as though she had suddenly resolved to make him a present of them. But if we cannot be married, we can be engaged. Nobody will know but ourselves, Raoul. There have been plenty of secret marriages. Why not a secret engagement? We are engaged, dear, for a month. In a month you will go away, and I can be happy at the thought of that month of my life long. And I can be happy of that month all my life long. She was enchanted with her inspiration. Then she became serious again. This, she said, is a happiness that will harm no one. Raoul jumped at the idea. He bowed to Christine and said, Mademoiselle, I have the honor to ask for your hand. Why? You have both of them already, my dear betrothed. Oh. Raoul, how happy we shall be. We must play at being engaged from morning till night. It was the prettiest game in the world, and they enjoyed it like children that they are. Oh, the wonderful speeches they made to each other and the eternal vows they exchanged. They played at hearts that other children might play at ball. Only, as it was really their 2 hearts that they flung to and fro, they had to be very, very handy to catch them, each time without hurting them. One day, about a week after the game began, Raoul's heart was badly hurt, and he stopped playing and uttered these wild words. I shan't go to the North Pole. Christine, who in her innocence had not dreamt of such a possibility, suddenly discovered the danger of the game and reproached herself bitterly. She did not say a word in reply to Raoul's remark and went straight home. This happened in the afternoon in the singers' dressing room, where they met every day and amused themselves by dining off 3 biscuits, 2 glasses of port, and a bunch of violets. In the evening she did not sing, and he did not receive his usual letter, though they had arranged to write to each other daily during that month. The next morning he ran off to Mamma Valerius, who told him that Christine had gone away for 2 days. She had left at 5 o'clock the day before. Raoul was distracted. He hated Mamma Valerius for giving him such news as that with such stupefying calmness. He tried to sound her, but the old lady obviously knew nothing. Christine returned on the following day. She returned in triumph. She renewed her extraordinary success of the gala performance. Since the adventure of the toad, Carlotta had not been able to appear on the stage. The terror of a fresh quack filled her heart and deprived her of all her power of singing, and the theater that had witnessed her incomprehensible disgrace had become odious to her. She contrived to cancel her contract. Daae was offered the vacant place for the time. She received thunders of applause in the Thave. The Viscount, who of course was present, was the only one to suffer on hearing the 1,000 echoes of this fresh triumph, for Christine still wore her plain gold ring. A distant voice whispered in the young man's ear, "She is wearing the ring again tonight, and you did not give it to her. She gave her soul again tonight, and did not give it to you. If she will not tell you what she has been doing these last 2 days, you must go and ask Eric." He ran behind the scenes and placed himself in her way. She saw him, for her eyes were looking for him. She said, "Quick, quick, come," and she dragged him to her dressing room. Raoul at once threw himself on his knees before her. He swore that he would go, and he entreated her never again to withhold a single hour of the ideal happiness which she had promised him. She let her tears flow. They kissed like a despairing brother and sister who have been smitten with a common loss, and who meet to mourn a dead parent. Suddenly, she snatched herself from the young man's soft and timid embrace, seemed to listen to something, and, with a quick gesture, pointed to the door. When he was on the threshold, she said, in so low a voice that the Viscount guessed rather than heard her words, "Tomorrow, my dear betrothed, and be happy, Raoul. I sang for you tonight." He returned the next day, but those 2 days of absence had broken the charm of their delightful make-believe. They looked at each other in the dressing room with their sad eyes, without exchanging a word. Raoul had to restrain himself not to cry out, "I am jealous, I am jealous, I am jealous." But she heard him all the same. Then she said, "Come for a walk, dear. The air will do you good." Raoul thought that she would propose a stroll in the country, far from that building, which he detested as a prison whose gaoler he could feel walking within the walls. Oh, I think it's a gaoler. Gaoler he could feel walking within the walls. The gaoler, Eric. But she took him to the stage and made him sit on the wooden curb of a well, in the doubtful peace and coolness of a first scene set for the evening's performance. On another day, she wandered with him hand in hand along the deserted paths of a garden whose creepers had been cut out by a decorator's skillful hands. It was as though the real sky, the real flowers, the real earth were forbidden her for all time, and she condemned to breathe no other air than that of the theater. An occasional fireman passed, watching over their melancholy idyll from afar, and she would drag Raoul up above the clouds in the magnificent disorder of the grid. There she loved to make him giddy by running in front of him along the frail bridges, among the thousands of ropes fastened to the pulleys, the windlasses, the rollers, in the midst of a regular forest of yards and masts. If he hesitated, she said, with an adorable pout of her lips, "You, a sailor!" And then they returned to terra firma, that is to say, to some passage that led them to the little girls' dancing school, where brats between 6 and 10 were practicing their steps in the hope of becoming great dancers one day, covered with diamonds. Meanwhile, Christine gave them sweets instead. She took him to the wardrobe and property rooms, took him all over her empire, which was artificial but immense, covering 17 stories from the ground floor to the roof and inhabited by an army of subjects. She moved among them like a popular queen, encouraging them in their labors, sitting down in the workshops, giving words of advice to the workmen whose hands hesitated to cut into the rich stuffs that were to clothe heroes. They were inhabitants of that country who practiced every trade. There were cobblers, there were goldsmiths. All had learned to love her, for she interested herself in all their troubles and all their little hobbies. She knew unsuspected corners that were secretly occupied by little old couples. She knocked at their door and introduced Raoul to them as a Prince Charming who had asked for her hand, and the two of them, sitting on some worm-eaten property, would listen to the legends of the opera even as, in their childhood, they had listened to the Breton folk tales. Those old people remembered nothing outside the opera. They had lived there for years without number. Past managements had forgotten them. Palace revolutions had taken no notice of them. The history of France had run its course unknown to them, and nobody recollected their existence. The precious days sped in this way, and Raoul and Christine, by affecting excessive interest in outside matters, strove awkwardly to hide from each other the one thought of their hearts. The one fact was certain, that Christine, who until then had shown herself the stronger of the two, suddenly became inexplicably nervous. When, on their expeditions, she would start running without reason, or else suddenly stop, and her hand, turning ice cold in a moment, would hold the young man back. Sometimes her eyes seemed to pursue imaginary shadows. She cried, "This way," and "this way," and "this way," laughing a breathless laugh that often ended in tears. Then Raoul tried to speak, to question her, in spite of his promise, but even before he had worded his question, she answered feverishly, "Nothing. I swear it's nothing." Once, when they were passing before an open trapdoor on the stage, Raoul stopped over the dark cavity and said, "You have shown me over the upper part of your empire, Christine, but there are strange stories told of the lower part. Shall we go down?" She caught him in her arms as though she feared to see him disappear down the black hole, and in a trembling voice whispered, "Never. I will not have you go there. Besides, it's not mine. Everything that is underground belongs to him." Raoul looked her in the eyes and said roughly, "So he lives down there, does he?" "I never said so. Who told you a thing like that? Come away. I sometimes wonder if you are quite sane, Raoul. You always take things in such an impossible way. Come along. Come." And she literally dragged him away, for he was obstinate and wanted to remain by the trap door. That hole attracted him. Suddenly the trap door was closed, and so quickly that they did not even see the hand that worked it, and they remained quite dazed. "Perhaps he was there," Raoul said at last. She shrugged her shoulders, but did not seem very easy. No, it was the trapdoor shutters. They must do something, you know. They open and shut the trapdoors without any particular reason. It's like the door shutters. They must spend their time somehow." "But suppose it were he, Christine?" No. He has shut himself up. He is working." "Oh, really? He's working, is he?" "Yes. He can't open and shut trapdoors and work at the same time." She shivered. "What is he working at?" "Oh, something terrible. But it's all the better for us. When he's working at that, he sees nothing, and he does not eat, drink, or breathe for days and nights at a time. He becomes a living dead man and has no time to amuse himself with the trap doors." She shivered again. She was still holding him in her arms. Then she sighed and said, in her turn, "Suppose it were he?" "Are you afraid of him?" No, of course not," she said. For all that, on the next day and the following days, Christine was careful to avoid the trapdoors. Her agitation increased as the hours passed. At last, one afternoon, she arrived very late, with her face so desperately pale and her eyes so desperately red, that Raoul resolved to go to all lengths, including that which he foreshadowed when he blurted out that he would not go on the North Pole expedition unless she first told him the secret of the man's voice. Hush, hush, in heaven's name! Suppose he heard you! You unfortunate Raoul. And Christine's eyes stared wildly at everything round her. I will remove you from his power, Christine, I swear it, and you shall not think of him any more. Is it possible? She allowed herself this doubt, which was an encouragement while dragging the young man up to the topmost floor of the theater, far, far from the trapdoors. I shall hide you in some unknown corner of the world where he cannot come to look for you. You will be safe, and then I shall go away, as you have sworn never to marry. Christine seized Raoul's hands and squeezed them with incredible rapture, but suddenly alarmed, she turned away her head. Higher, was all she said. Higher still. And she dragged him up towards the summit of the building. He had a difficulty in following her. They were soon under the very roof, in the maze of timber work. They slipped through the buttresses, the rafters, the joists. They ran from beam to beam as they might have ran from tree to tree in a forest. And despite the care which she took to look behind her at every moment, she failed to see a shadow which followed her like her own shadow, which stopped when she stopped, which started again when she did, and which made no more noise than a well-conducted shadow should. As for Raoul, he saw nothing either, for when he had Christine in front of him, nothing interested him that happened behind. End of chapter 11, and I'm going to stop there right now because chapter 12 is a little bit longer. But I had never heard of the month where they pretended to be engaged. Oh, I guess in the movie they do actually get engaged, like for real, and it is a secret. Okay, never mind, it exists. I was just thinking. Anyway, until next time, yeah, just until next time, and we will continue on chapter 12. Goodbye.